Today we're going to be exploring how mental strategies used by a champion in another sport can be applied to swimmers and their coaches.
Oh, wow.
It's a really unique perspective on maximizing performance through mental techniques.
We tend to focus so much on the physical side,
Yeah.
technique, training plans, nutrition, that we forget about the mental aspects of performance.
He really hammers home the importance of stress management, saying it's crucial for peak performance.
Good.
Yeah, he believes that mastering your response to pressure is key to unlocking your potential. Now, while the specific stresses might differ between swimmers and athletes in other sports, the underlying principle is the same.
Absolutely. Think about your swimmers, especially those who just seem to crumble under pressure at big meets. They might be physically prepared, but if their mental game is off, it can totally sabotage their performance.
Biofeedback, meditation, autogenic training, and progressive relaxation.
Okay.
But of all of these, he's a huge advocate for progressive relaxation because of its simplicity and effectiveness, especially for beginners.
Yeah, that's a great one to start with because it's something that coaches can easily teach their swimmers.
Exactly.
It involves systematically tensing and relaxing different muscle groups, which then induces this deep state of physical relaxation that helps to calm the mind.
So how would a swim coach actually implement this with their athletes?
Well, it could be as simple as having your swimmers lie down on the pool deck after a tough practice, and you guide them to tense and relax different muscle groups, starting with their toes and working their way up to their head.
Okay.
The key is to really focus on the sensations of tension and release, allowing the body to let go of that stress.
Gotcha. Now, another technique that the OG was obsessed with was visualization.
Interesting.
He talks about mentally rehearsing his movements thousands of times in his mind. Like he believed that practice makes perfect, even if that practice was only happening in his head.
And there's actually some solid science behind that. Visualization primes the brain and the nervous system for actual performance. It's like creating a mental blueprint for success.
Right. By repeatedly imagining the movements, you're strengthening the neural pathways involved in execution.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. So how can swim coaches use this? I'm picturing swimmers lying down with their eyes closed, mentally swimming their races, stroke by stroke.
You got it. You can guide them to visualize every single detail. The feeling of the water, the sound of their breath, the push off the wall, the perfect streamline.
Would they imagine themselves winning the race?
That really depends on the swimmer and their goals. For some, visualizing a win might boost their confidence, but for others, it might add unnecessary pressure.
Yeah.
I think the key is to focus on the process, the execution of each skill, rather than the outcome.
That makes sense. It's about controlling what you can control, right? Now let's talk about competition strategies. The OG had a fascinating approach to his opening attempts. His philosophy was all about staying in the game, not necessarily going for a personal best right out of the gate.
I like that.
What do you think about that?
That's a brilliant strategy, and it applies perfectly to swimming, especially in multi-day meets. Think about a swimmer who goes all out in prelims trying to break a record, only to burn out and miss the finals completely.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking to see. It happens more often than we'd like to admit.
The OG's approach reminds us that sometimes it's better to be strategic, to conserve energy and focus on advancing through each round. It's about the long game, not just a single race.
So how do we teach this to our swimmers? They're so driven and competitive. They want to go fast every time they hit the water.
It starts with a shift in mindset. Help them see the bigger picture, the ultimate goal of the meet. Talk about pacing energy management and the importance of peaking at the right time. You can even use examples of successful athletes who've used similar strategies.
Now, this next part is interesting. The OG talks about all these wild psyching up techniques that some athletes use, like yelling, slapping themselves, even headbanging. But he warns against the dangers of over-arousal, especially for less experienced athletes.
Yeah, it's crucial to understand that different events and even different swimmers have varying arousal needs. A sprinter might need to tap into a more intense energy, while a distance swimmer might benefit from a calmer, more locused state.
So as coaches, we need to help each swimmer find their optimal pre-race state, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely. Some swimmers might need a pep talk, some might need to listen to music, others might just need some quiet time to focus. It's about knowing your swimmers and guiding them to the mental state that allows them to perform their best.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The OG shares a powerful story about a champion athlete who just couldn't handle losing his first big competition and never really recovered mentally. It's a reminder that defeat is inevitable, and it's how we respond to those setbacks that truly defines us.
Resilience is a key skill for any athlete, and it's something we can cultivate in our swimmers. It's about helping them view setbacks as opportunities for growth, not as personal failures.
So how do we actually do that? These kids are putting so much pressure on themselves. They tie their self-worth to their performance in the pool.
It's about shifting the focus from outcome to process. Instead of dwelling on the win or loss, help them analyze their performance. What went well? What can be improved? What did they learn from the experience? Celebrate effort and improvement even if it doesn't result in a medal.
I love that. It's about building their confidence and self-belief regardless of the outcome of a single race.
Exactly. It's about helping them develop a growth mindset, understanding that setbacks are part of the journey and that they can learn and get stronger from every experience.
Okay, now let's dive into one of the OG's most intriguing techniques, model training.
Okay.
He talks about making practice as close to competition as possible, even replicating the environment, the sounds, the pressure. It's about training the mind and body to perform under the same conditions they'll face on race day.
Model training is a powerful tool, especially for swimmers who struggle with nerves, or who perform well in practice but just crumble under the pressure of a meet.
So how can we translate this to the pool? It's not like we can recreate a packed stadium atmosphere in our local YMCA.
We can get creative. You could have swimmers race in practice wearing their competition suits, caps, and goggles. You could use a starter's gun and timing system. You could even play crowd noise recordings during their main sets.
Those are great ideas. And it doesn't have to be a big production. Even small adjustments can make a big difference. For example, we could have swimmers practice their starts and turns with the starter's commands, simulating the pressure of a real race.
Exactly. It's about exposing them to those triggers, those sensory experiences that can throw them off their game in competition.
Now, the OG was a big believer in using equipment to enhance performance. He believed that if there was something that could give you an edge, you should use it, even if it wasn't the most fashionable or popular choice.
That's an interesting point. Sometimes we let our egos or preconceived notions get in the way of progress.
Totally. It's about being open to new ideas, exploring different options, and finding what works best for each individual athlete.
He even shares a story about how he resisted a particular piece of equipment because he thought it looked uncool.
Really?
But once he tried it and saw the results, he quickly changed his mind.
That's a great reminder that we should always be willing to challenge our assumptions and be open to trying new things. Think about something as simple as tech suits in swimming. There was a time when they were controversial, but now they're commonplace.
It's not about cheating, it's about using the tools available to help athletes perform at their best. As long as the equipment is legal and ethical, why wouldn't we explore every avenue to help our swimmers succeed?
Now, this next part is a bit unconventional. The OG talks about his approach to warming up, and it's not what you'd expect. He actually stopped doing traditional warm-up exercises for years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was his reasoning behind that?
Well, he felt that for him, traditional warm-ups didn't necessarily improve his performance, and in some cases might even have a negative impact.
Interesting. He actually conducted studies on this.
Yeah, and for certain movements, his subjects actually performed better without warming up. But he did find that warming up was beneficial for other movements that required more explosive power from a standstill.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. And as coaches, we need to be open to exploring different approaches and helping our swimmers find what works best for them.
I agree. Now, he didn't completely abandon warming up. He just shifted his focus to a technique called plyometric stretching, which involves rapid and forceful movements.
Interesting.
He believed that this type of stretching helped to increase muscle contractibility and therefore power. But again, it's important to remember that what works for one person might not work for another.
Right. And as coaches, we need to be mindful of the potential risks involved with any new technique, especially those that involve high-impact movements.
Absolutely. Safety first.
Always. All right, coaches, that's a lot to digest. We've covered stress management, visualization, competition strategies, model training, and even some unconventional warm-up techniques.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. We'll be back in a flash for the final part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
So we left off talking about this idea of model training, right? Making practice as close to competition as possible.
Right.
But how do we actually do that in swimming? It's not like we could pack the stands with screaming fans every day at practice.
True, but we can still get pretty creative. You know, have your swimmers wear their tech suits, caps, and goggles in practice. Use a timing system. Even play some crowd noise recordings during those tough main sets. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be a huge spectacle. Even those small adjustments can have a big difference.
It's about being open to new ideas, exploring different options, and finding what works best for each individual athlete. Now, this next part might be a bit surprising. The OG talks about his approach to warming up, and it's not what you might expect. He actually stopped doing traditional warm-up exercises altogether for years.
Wow, that's pretty radical. What was his reasoning behind that?
He felt that for him personally, traditional warm-ups just didn't really improve his performance. And in some cases, he even felt like they had negative impact.
That's really interesting.
He actually conducted studies on this. And for certain movements, his subjects performed better without warming up. However, he did find that warming up was beneficial for other types of movements, the ones that required more explosive power from a starting position.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. And as coaches, we need to be open to exploring different approaches and helping our swimmers find what works best for them.
For sure. Now, did he ever warm up at all, or was it a complete no-go?
He did eventually start incorporating a different type of warm-up. He shifted his focus to something called plyometric stretching, which involves rapid and forceful movements. He believed that this type of stretching helped to increase muscle contractibility and therefore power. But again, it's important to remember that what works for one person might not work for another.
Right, and as coaches, we also need to be mindful of the potential risks involved with any new technique, especially those that involve high-impact or explosive movements.
Absolutely. Safety always comes first. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about pre-competition anxiety. The OG suggests that while waiting to compete, it's best to avoid the competitive environment as much as possible.
Makes sense.
He says to engage in more contemplative activities, like reading or listening to music, to keep the mind occupied and prevent it from dwelling on the upcoming competition.
That's a good strategy. Anxiety often stems from what we call cognitive rehearsal, the act of repeatedly thinking about and visualizing the stressful event.
So by distracting the mind with something enjoyable or relaxing, we can kind of break that cycle of negative thinking and help our swimmers stay calm and focused.
Exactly. Now, he also mentions the benefits of massage for both physical and psychological reasons.
He acknowledges that the research on massage's impact on performance is kind of mixed, but believes it could be a valuable tool for reducing anxiety and promoting relaxation.
Of course, we need to be mindful of appropriate boundaries and swimmer safety when it comes to massage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? He also talks about using cold or hot showers.
Interesting. What's the verdict on that?
The research there is also inconclusive. Some studies suggest potential benefits, while others show no effect or even a negative impact.
So maybe more of a psychological thing. If a swimmer believes it will help them, it just might.
It's amazing how powerful the mind can be. The OG also discusses the role of specific warm-ups in managing anxiety and preparing for competition.
Okay.
He cites research from Europe that suggests that targeted warm-ups can be really effective in adjusting an athlete's activation level, bringing them to that optimal state for competition.
But has that been replicated in other studies?
He does mention that studies done here in the U.S. haven't consistently supported those findings.
So it seems like more research is needed in this area to determine the most effective warm-up strategies for different sports and athletes.
Now, one thing that the OG was really adamant about was making weight safely and effectively.
That's an important topic, especially in weight class sports.
He shares his own experiences with weight management, both good and bad, and really highlights the potential dangers of extreme methods.
Yeah, I'm sure he's seen it all.
He cautions against using drastic dehydration techniques and stresses the importance of working with a medical professional to develop a safe and sustainable plan.
That's good advice.
He also delves into the use of diuretics, emphasizing the risks associated with those medications and the need for close medical supervision.
Those can be really dangerous if not used properly.
He even recounts a story of a fellow athlete who nearly died from complications related to diuretic use.
Wow. It's a stark reminder that pushing the limits can have serious consequences and that health should always be the top priority.
Absolutely. Okay, coaches, we've covered a ton of information in this part. Everything from model training and equipment to warming up and weight management.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but I think it's all incredibly valuable stuff. We'll be back in a moment to wrap things up and discuss some key takeaways for swim coaches.
Thanks for listening to Heavy or Not, a podcast from the International Swim Coaches Association. We'd love if you would to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and fellow coaches. ISCA hosts a number of meets throughout the year. In championship seasons, bring your elite swimmers down to St. Petersburg for a senior or age group championship meet, short course and or long course, as well as a fall open water swim, and newer meets are on the schedule too. There's a fall classic in November and another one in January. You can bring your whole team on a travel meet to Hampton, Virginia, Plus, that's also going to be the site for the new short course meter meet, the Global Aquatic Age Group Championships, to happen in December in Hampton, Virginia. So check it out. Go to swimisca.org and see our calendar.
All right, coaches, welcome back to the final part of our deep dives, where we're going to distill everything we've learned from the OG and see how it can be applied to swimming. Okay, so the OG was really big on pre-competition nutrition, especially that last meal before a big event.
Yeah, makes sense. You want to make sure you're properly fueled.
Exactly. He believed that consuming glucose in tablet form was the key. Maximizing energy without adding extra weight.
Yeah, especially for those athletes who are cutting weight or trying to stay within a specific weight class.
Right. But it's super important to remember that this strategy might not be right for every swimmer. Some might have different dietary needs or restrictions.
Absolutely. Always consult with a sports nutritionist or a registered dietitian to create a fueling plan that's tailored to each individual athlete.
Couldn't agree more. And of course, we can't forget the fundamentals. Nutrition, proper equipment, safe weight management. Those are all critical components of success and areas where we as coaches can have a huge impact.
And let's not underestimate the power of belief. If a swimmer believes they can achieve something, they're much more likely to make it happen. Our job as coaches is to cultivate that belief, to nurture their confidence, and to help them see their own potential.
So coaches, I encourage you to experiment with the techniques we've discussed today. Find what works best for you and your swimmers and never stop learning and growing as a coach. And here's a final thought-provoking question to leave you with. If you could practice one coaching skill in your mind as intensely as the OG practiced his movements, what would it be? And how would it transform your coaching? Think about that, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
Before signing off, let me point you to one other free resource. Go to the World Aquatic Federation of Schools and Universities. It's a new organization started in 2024. Go to wafsu.org and check out the courses there. Enjoy. We'll see you around the pool soon.